Hello, everyone. This is Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Webinars. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Bank Relationship Management, Communication, Bank Freeze, RAROC, and Collaboration. I would like to thank our webinar partner today, Financial Sciences, who shares our strong commitment to thought leadership, but also shares our commitment to serving the finance and treasury professions. Later on in our webinar today, you will hear from my esteemed co-speakers, Alf Newland, who's the CEO of Financial Sciences, and Nathan Barnett, who's a product manager for Financial Sciences. And I will introduce them a little bit later in the webinar, but we are thrilled to have them on board, and they are a longtime strategic partner of mine. A few housekeeping notes before we get going. Anyone who is interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to stay on for the remainder of the webinar, answer all the polling questions, and also take the short survey, which will launch immediately following the webinar today. Also, I want to let everyone know that we can take your questions at any time in the questions area. If you go to webinar control panel, more than likely we won't have time for your questions. We have a lot of content to get to, but fear not, we will reach out to you after the webinar is over if you have any questions. If you have any questions regarding CTP credits or would like a copy of today's presentation, please send an email to Ernie@treasurywebinars.com. Again, that's Ernie@treasurywebinars.com. If you don't get your CTP certificate right away, please bear with me. I do the best that I can. So let's go ahead and kind of tee things up for our agenda today. So first, we're going to take a look at the dimensions of bank relationship management. And really, a lot of those dimensions have changed in nuance because of COVID, right, in this new world that we're in. And so communication is more important than ever. And one thing that you'll hear me say probably more than once is one of the few good things that's come out of the results of COVID is I think people are communicating more and aligning more often on expectations. And so let's align on expectations. And the other thing that I've been talking a lot about, which I wish I would have had this perspective as a practitioner, is that we as Treasury practitioners have a job to be a good customer. And so in order to get the most out of our relationships, we have to be a good customer, and we need to be willing to ask our bank partners what that is and listen to their feedback and then involve them, right? If we're going to judge them and on their performance, well, let's let them know how they're being judged. And if they want to know, let's share that with them. And on the other side, right, on the bank relationship side, for my banks out there, we want to know what is your return on assets, return on capital model, your RAROC model. What is that? Share it with us. We want to know how we're offering value to you. So that may help inform us on our decisions. From my perspective as a Treasury practitioner, put my Treasury practitioner hat on, if I were to know that there's a bank that's giving me credit who makes a lot of money in a certain area in which they deliver a very good product, maybe not the low cost product, I would give them that business, right? I want to make strategic decisions about my bank wallet. And so you have to be honest with me. Also, I want to make sure that you're valuing the risk of my company the right way. So for me, when I was in Treasury, we were a small, thinly traded middle market company, but we were an A credit by any stretch of anyone's imagination. And my boss did a fantastic job in proactively going out to the banks and sharing with them anything of information they wanted to know to get us priced correctly on our credit. So relationships are a two-way street. Then we'll talk about some current and emerging trends in bank relationship management, and then I'll hand the floor over to my friends at Financial Sciences, and they'll show us a leading technology platform of theirs. Adam, it's really interesting. It's a fascinating, it's more of a visual approach to managing relationships and also your bank activities. And so it's really, to me, it really makes a lot of sense, and it helps you ask the right questions. And so what we'll do there is I'll let Alpha take us through, some of the points of the value of technology, and then Nathan will give us a brief tour, because we really need to see this, because it really is an amazing visual product. And then we'll turn the page back a little bit and talk about the role of RAROC, and then we'll finish things up with some key takeaways. So a lot to cover. Again, I want to make sure I leave enough time for my friends at Financial Sciences. I'm not very good at doing this. So doing that. So let's go ahead and launch our first polling question. Just want to really get a sense of where we're at from the audience, asking you to share your reaction. Is bank relationship management a top priority? of the Treasury Department at your company. Now, when I used to work at AFP, way back in the day, maybe 2000, I don't even remember anymore, 2007, 2009, we had a whole bank relationship management suite. And honestly, it was a top priority, but then I've seen it probably over the next 6 or 7 years, it wasn't, but I think we're seeing a little bit of a trend back towards that. And then please be honest, I'm not going to tell on you, right? But I just want to get a sense. Those of you interested in receiving CTP credits, again, you'll have to answer all of our polling question. Everyone, if you're on with us, please take a minute, push the button, right? That would be awesome. So let's go ahead and just leave the polling question up for another few seconds for my folks who are interested in CTP credits. Give you a few more seconds so I don't get nasty emails saying that you don't get CTP credits. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick peek at the results. I'm glad to see that over half of you is a top priority. And of course, where you stand depends on where you sit, right? You might be in a cash-rich position. If so, good for you. If you're not and you have any borrowing at all, and you're really looking to do like the best of the best and really get the most out of your relationships, I would hope that I'd be able to get some of you in the other 46%. Up to it's a top priority. I guess I should have had another category in there that said agree. So there's kind of room there. Maybe not top priority, but I think it should be a top priority, especially especially if you have a position in Treasury. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the dimensions, and then we'll kind of dive in to these. I mean, some of these to some of you may seem like common sense, but that's why I have a job. I do a good job at reminding people what's important and get them to ask the right questions, take another look, take a look in the mirror, and have conversations, right, with your team. If you're not in Treasury, with those in your Treasury Department, with your Treasury Department, with your team, with your CFO. So we'll talk about credit, technology, the relationship, customer service, the price, and the communication side of things. Just real quick, there's some interesting research that I've been involved with from the Treasury Coalition, Strategic Treasurer. And my friend Craig Jeffrey have done a great job. If you haven't seen this research, Craig started this probably back in April, last April, so it's over like 15, 16 months ago. It's just interesting to see the dynamics of what happened. Again, where you stand depends on where you sit. One of the things that's interesting to me was the access to liquidity. So when we first started COVID, well, we don't know what's going to happen. We haven't had a cycle of not getting paid. And then, it became more important. And then I think we thought COVID was going away. And so it's interesting to see on the dynamics of that side. So there's still a lot of interesting research if you want to take a look back, but also take a look forward, treasurycoalition.com. And then some more graphs here. And I'm not going to try and go through this graph. I would probably have to have Craig come on to explain this graph. But those of you who really want to dive in to the different areas here. So we look at the trends, right? If you want to look at bank lines of credit, obviously that these are all related. Most of them related to your bank relationships, covenant requirements, right? If you issue commercial paper, right, your accounts receivable, so the cost of borrowing. So just interesting. Again, I just wanted to kind of point you there. If you would like a copy of the presentation, the hyperlinks are there, and go to strategictreasurer.com. They have a lot of cool resources there. And so let's go ahead and hit you up with another question about bank relationships here, just to level set again. How would you characterize your current bank relationships? Again, I'm not going to tell on you. Do you think they're poor, not good, acceptable, but getting better, good, or ideal? Again, so I won't have a polling question every 5 minutes. I just want to help us set the stage here for you guys. And if you haven't been on my webinar for a while, you might just have it itching, because I know you love to do polling questions. So let's go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds or so. Again, those of you interested in receiving CTP credits, you'll have to answer all the polling questions here today. Also want to remind you, we can take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. Again, we'll get to those if at all possible. So let me give you guys another few seconds in order to be mindful of our time. And a few more seconds. Last time we had a few more folks vote. I want to make sure that you have the chance. There we go. They have a little latency probably for when you push. So let me go ahead and, all right, let's close. Let's go ahead and take a peek. I'm happy to see this. 65% good, 10% ideal, so 75%. acceptable, but getting better. That's not a bad place to be, but I think the onus as a Treasury practitioner for me would be on your side to be more open to aligning on expectations, more transparency, more commitment to being a good customer. If you want to have a conversation about what that looks like with me and not your banker, I'm happy to share with you, because I was not a good customer back in the day. So it's very important to me that I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of Treasury people who I believe are good customers, and listen to them, live and learn every day. So let's go ahead and take a look. And it just, so sometimes I think you may put these on autopilot. And so there's a lot of dimensions to this relationship. And so to me, I think, again, I'm going to keep my Treasury leader hat on. These are the things that you should be thinking about. These are expectations you should have on your bank, but these are also things that you should make sure that you empower your bank to have the knowledge about your company. So for each bank relationship, what is their IQ about your company? What is their IQ about your department? What is their IQ about your career? What is your IQ about the career of your Treasury team? They should care about all these things. So will your bank be there during the next crisis? Some of us found out, right? As COVID has taken place, what happened? Did you need to draw on lines of credit? And so back in 2008, banks didn't like that. I think many of them learned that was a no-no, because the shoe almost always is on the other foot. Sometimes the bank has the upper hand, and sometimes they don't. So what do they really know about your company? What do they really know about your Treasury objectives? Are they asking? You should be telling them, right? And you should expect them to be honest. If something is not their forte, right, I'm going to go to, let's just say for the sake of argument, we're going to talk about lockbox, even though those are kind of the same. But you don't have the best lockbox in the world. Don't try and sell me lockbox services. Why? I mean, you do that. Let's say I bite, and then, and then they're not great. What's going to happen? You're going to ruin the whole relationship. So lead with honesty and authenticity, right? And then what do they know about your Treasury team? So they should have an interest, right, in your team, right? They should treat each team member with the same respect they treat with the treasurer and the CFO. If they don't, look elsewhere. And then you should challenge yourself. What do we really know about the bank, right? Not only what's the counterparty risk, what's their strategy, what about their technology? Did they develop it internally? Do they white label it? If they do white label it, who is that with? Again, you want to empower your bank to understand and anticipate your needs and expectations. And then also, some of my old bank partners would probably flip out if they saw this. They'd be in shock. Support your bank when they make mistakes. And I will admit I did not do this. Now, I did if they came out and owned their mistakes. I think this is part of the relationship training. And so you should teach your people to own their mistakes. Just say, I made a mistake. Let's move forward. Don't try and make an excuse about someone else on your team. If the technology didn't work, it's your bank. Own it, right? We're all human beings, and I hope COVID has taught us all to be more human more often. And so evaluating bank relationship, another thing that used to be prevalent, which I think is starting to come back from what I've seen in my surveys, people used to use bank scorecard, right? So let's talk about using best practices. This is just a way to put some quantitative framework around your bank relationships, right? And so what you're trying to do is measure how the bank offers value to you, right? And score that. But I think one of the big misses, a couple big misses that I've seen in general, because I actually had a colleague of mine, Terrence Foster, go out and build the template, was it was way too long. These things were way too long, and I don't think these were shared with banks. How would you even ask your bank to be involved, right, in how they're being judged, and let them know that honesty, believe it or not, is the best policy. And then, share your evaluation, right, to the service provider, only for improving their relationship. Don't do it to kind of beat them over the head with a stick and threaten them that you're going to go shop somewhere else. Use it as a relationship tool. Invest in actual relationships. And then when you're developing the scorecard, you should, you should let the people that have the most interaction with the banks have a part in it. So if you're the treasurer and you're not involved in the operations at all, don't sit there and put the scorecard together, right? You don't really know what issues of friction there are. And you, as great as you are as a leader, you probably haven't sat in the desk, and technology has changed quite a bit, right? And then how about this this is a novel idea, I'm going to trademark this. How about the banks provide you a scorecard, right? Which they measure how you do as a customer, right? How are we doing? What can we do for you, right? The banks, in a sense, you should look at them as a customer. They do, you pay, right? You know, price is what you pay, value is what you get, right? You want that value on both sides of the relationship. And so, as I said, we want the best price. However, we also need to look at service, right? To me, service is probably more important than price. And again, it depends on the service, but there's not a whole lot. A lot of things have become commoditized, whether we like it or not. So just real quick, I mean, this is for your reference, if nothing else, after the webinar. If you've never really seen a bank scorecard, or the sections are just usually the customer service, how that's taken care of, how your relationship manager, the technical side, the account analysis statement, which is all our favorite, right? Bank fees, understanding that, your bank counterparty risk assessment on the bank side, their risk of having issues, and then your service category assessment, if you can get that deep and understand that. So I know all you guys are excited. This is the last polling question for a while, I promise. I want to get a sense from you as far as where you are in the audience. If you use a bank scorecard at this point, the answer is yes, no, but you used to use them, no, we never have, and 16% you don't know. Those of you who say you don't know, you know I'm going to tell you it's your job to find out after the webinar is over. So again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Again, I'm serious. This is our last one for a while. I'd appreciate everyone's consideration in just pushing the button for me. And we'll go ahead and leave the polling question up another few seconds, and then we'll go ahead and take a quick peek, and then we'll dive into some other dimensions of bank relationship management. So let's go ahead and give this one a few more seconds. Let's go ahead and close that. Let's go ahead and share the results. And so what we see here is that we've got only 39% have ever used them. So that's a little bit lower than I expected. And so 49% never use them, don't know. I would ask why not. Again, it may correlate to the other question where it wasn't a huge priority for bank relationships, and maybe you're cash rich and you don't need to have a lot of communication with your banks yet, but as you grow, you will. So my advice is to go ahead and understand how they work, implement those, even if that is with one bank. Banks should always be on their toes all the time, and they should earn your business, right? We're going to a subscription economy, so everyone should be earning their business. And so let's take a look at customer service number. Again, these are my questions and also from conversations with a lot of people. What about, do they have an 800 number? Do you have a dedicated customer service representative? Do they have someone that can, even if it's not the same person, is it when you call, do they have access to all dimensions of your relationship, right? When I used to work in Treasury, I had pension plan, I had lockbox, I had letters of credit, I had all these things, but sometimes it was hard for someone to have visibility into all those dimensions, right? I didn't like to be passed around on the phone. Again, that visibility. And then again, I mentioned this as well, to me, respect is everything. Is your entire team treated with respect? Do I have to get on the phone because we have an issue, or are you going to treat anyone, right? Anyone in my treasury department like they're the CEO of my company? That's the respect they deserve. Again, here's some other things to think about. You have to let your banks know your team, but when your banks come in, why don't you take your whole team to lunch? Expose them to your team, expose them to your relationship manager, right? Do you have direct access to expertise, right? So how long does it take to get a question answered? Is someone reading off a script? Is someone going to tell you to restart your computer or clear your cache? How many hours have I spent as a treasury professional on the phone with my bank? Sorry, I'm going to bank bash for a moment here. If I had $1 for every hour I wasted trying to tell people how to troubleshoot their own system, I'd be a rich man. And then you also want to make sure that if you have a global company, what types of service do they have, and how can they support your team 24/7? And also on the bank pricing, that's a whole nother webinar, right? And just some benchmarks in case you haven't really been in the weeds this much. How much does it cost you to run your bank operations, right? How do you benchmark that? How do you benchmark that over time and internally, right? What you've been paying before. You need to understand how to level set, right? Based on the changes in your activity. You need to know how to read your analysis statement, right? And decipher. You should understand every single line of every single account analysis statement that you get. And if someone's giving you bundled pricing, it will at least one time make them unbundle it so you understand every single thing that you're paying for. Like along those same lines, do you have negotiated pricing? Again, this seems like it's easy, but for me, when I first started, it wasn't easy. How many bank accounts do I have? Why do I have each one, right? Do I have a standard suite? How many services do I use? How often do I look at my trends? Do I use an account analysis software tool? Is that going to be valuable to me? You should be looking at the variances, right? And if you do an acquisition or you do, let's say you convert to ACH, you should see those reflected in your activity. And so instead of just, here's an example, well, my bank fees went up 30%. And you start yelling at your bank, and then the bank's like, and then you go back to someone and say, oh, accounts payable. Oh, I didn't know we moved a bunch of our people off of checks into ACH, and that's why my ACH charges went up. Oops, that's a little embarrassing. And then, of course, this is another webinar. How much are you earning on your balances, and make sure that you understand that ECR calculation. And then on the services side, I mean, this has been a struggle for Treasury professionals. I still don't think that we're close to having transparency, but there's a lot more organizations and tools out there recently. I've seen Strategic Treasurer get in the game for us, and I knew they do a great job. And there's also a lot of other great tools, Redbridge Debt and Advisory Services. So those are two that come to mind that I think offer good solutions. Is your pricing transparent? Again, do you understand what you're paying for? What's your pricing structure? Treasury practitioners, watch for the bundling. Does your relationship manager understand your accounting statement? I'm going to tell my story. It's a little old. When I asked someone to come in and explain a bank account analysis statement from a bank that no longer exists and got merged into, this is a true story. There was 7 people around a conference table, and they still couldn't explain to me line by line, and my CEO, who didn't have a good temper, pretty much blew a stack. So, does your bank help you benchmark their pricing? They should, right? What are they trying to hide? It's more transparent out there, right? So Honesty would say, I don't think we're the low cost provider doing this. However, we have great service. We're investing in XYZ. We're doing all these things to help you offer more value for your security. Then I'll be like, oh, okay, thank you. I just want to be, as consumers, we want to be informed. Help us make informed decisions. And then as far as I call it your bank fee IQ, to dovetail off those comments, are there any areas of the world in which you lack visibility? Are there ways to improve that? Again, we talked about negotiated pricing. Again, all these, it's so important. I did the same slide. And so you should have a defined process that identifies your billing errors, right? We used to do it in Excel, but I don't think you need to do that anymore. Ensure your banks are consistent in recording the fees and services. I used to look at my bank analysis statements month over month, and they changed the terms on my, wait, what is that? Oh, that's the same thing from last month. It's like, well, you should tell me, right, what that is, because I feel like you're trying to pull something over on me. Communicate regularly with your banks, right, about the pricing options. Benchmark, be proactive about that, right? I talked about this. Understand your variances in bank fees month over month. It's not that you shouldn't have variances, but those should be things that you expect. Compare your pricing across different banks. This helps if you understand codes and industry service codes. You can invest in establishing baselines for fee structures, and then look for your month over month trends as well. So be educated, right? Don't be obnoxious. Be educated. That's I should use that myself. I really encourage everyone to do at least a once a year service utilization review. It just assumes your services, you know what you're consuming and why, you understand your account analysis statement. And I think Nathan will show you a little bit later where the software they have is really interesting. It allows you to see all of your spend with your banks, which is important. And then you want to create a mirror of services, right, within your Treasury organization, and then see what that would cost if you change different areas in which you use Treasury service. communication is king, and it's become more interesting, right? Virtually, in person, right? I think we've had more virtual bank group meetings. I think now that we're more comfortable virtually, I would suggest we have those at least quarterly, right? You might have those individual quarterly ones as well. Of course, we still have our industry events. Let's congregate at virtual events as well. I have a Treasury and Finance virtual forum. The AFP is coming back in November. And then you have to understand the electronic side of it, right? We have EBAM, there's information reporting, there's bank fee statements, there's also just communicating with your banks, right? How are you exchanging information back and forth, especially if you're going across the globe? Who's managing all those formats? What's your IT cost? Do you work with a provider that offers that? And then communication, how to be a good customer. This is what I could have used this slide if I had a time machine, which I love. Back to the Future, I would give this to myself. Meet in person, understand the RAROC model, ensure each bank understands your company, right? Let's have proactive communication, honest communication, and set and reset relationship expectations as needed. If things are changing on my side from the business side, right? Say COVID hit, I can't control, my receivables are going to slow down. I might trip my covenants, so I'm going to call you and I'm going to tell you what's happening and why. And as a bank, if you have some exposures, right? I mean, COVID impacted everyone. Things are a little bit tighter here, right? We might need to revisit certain things, or we might not be as receptive to drawing your line of credit. That's okay. Let me know. Again, the shoe will always be on the other foot. Some of the BRM trends, I did a survey with High Radius, and we had over 280, almost 280 responses. So just to get some benchmarking on a lot of items and see how people measure Treasury success and why. So you can peruse the first slide at your leisure. We had a lot with little concentration in software and technology, but we had a really good mix on employee size and roles as well. And so, we had a pretty good range on number of bank relationships and number of banks. So I felt comfortable making some generalizations here. Here's a little just food for thought: frequency with bank partners. And this was taken this year in April. So COVID had been had hit us probably all for a year. So we had 45% was monthly, right? So we had 80% of our respondents, and I was very happy to see that, right? Leverage bank scorecards. A lot of folks were doing that now. So again, it's definitely worth a look. But again, you need to tailor it to your company. So don't get intimidated if it's 10, 20 pages long. The template that you get, I believe AFP still has one, but your bank partners should have one for you as well. And if you don't have one, let me know. I'll help you find one. Here are some surprising results on understands bank fees. 87% agree or strongly agree they understand. I said I'm going to have to question that one, but I hope that you do, and you should, right? And also a really high percentage of folks said they benchmark their bank fees, and I'd like to know how. I should have asked how. So if you're not doing that, I have resources for you to do. But those of you out there who are doing that, I'd love for you to share with me, right? How are you doing it? What resources are you using? Again, and you can see that we still have a way to go on understanding RAROC, return on asset, return on capital. That's how the banks at a very high level manage your value relationship. So that's really important. And then I said these numbers look a little off. So let's look at only only Treasury titles, right? But the numbers were a little bit less positive, but still surprising. We still had 70% agree or strongly agree they understand the bank fees, and 84% they are doing that benchmarking. So let me go ahead and shift gears a little bit and talk about the role of technology. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and welcome Alf Newland to the webinar. Alf is the CEO of Financial Sciences and a valued strategic partner of mine for many years. So Alf, why don't you give us just a little bit about your background, and welcome to the webinar, my friend.
Thanks, Ernie. Sure. Good evening, everybody. So Financial Sciences is a software provider. We provide Atom, which is a treasury management system. And one of the very important components of what we provide is bank relationship management. And Arnie, next slide. So what I wanted to start with is an overview of, well, what can you expect from technology to help manage bank relationships? So these are some of the things you should expect on the technology side. First, you should be able to model all the major aspects, all the components of your company's relationship with your banks. You know, that those relationships have many dimensions, and technology really should support all of them. Two, it should very quickly show up-to-date status, not just on the operational, but also on the enterprise level as well. It should be able to answer a lot of the questions you need to know very quickly, the typical Treasury type questions that the Treasury professionals have about bank activities, both on the executive level and of course operational level. For most big companies, bank relationship activity actually does have lots of transactions, both in terms of quantity of fees and account statements to workflow to credit facilities. So there's many transactions actually associated with bank relationships, and it is pretty important. Some of those you really can't do manually. So the automation of the related transaction activity is very important. And last, also extremely valuable is for the technology to help with decisioning. So it should be able to help you make changes where you're bringing on new banks or you're bringing on new services. And the next slide is shows maybe a definition of the different types of components that we see out there for holistic bank relationship management. It's at the very top is looking at the liquidity aspects. Of course, banks provide liquidity and funding, and that's an important part of the relationship. Banks also provide return on balances. That should really be included in the funding side because it is funding. Next, activity and services. Of course, banks provide lots of service capabilities in addition to liquidity funding and cash balances. So that's an important component. The relationship and quality aspect, and Ernie spent a good amount of time rightly on this. Probably for Treasury, I think it's safe to say that third-party banking relationships have to be the most important third-party relationships for Treasury as a whole. So that aspect, the relationship and the quality aspect, is extremely important. Cost. Most companies spend a significant amount of money on bank fees. So the cost component is critical to manage in the overall bank relationship. Companies have compliance, pretty strict compliance aspects with cash, obviously, in bank accounts. That's a key consideration. And lastly, as I mentioned, at least for most large treasuries, Treasury acts as a service center for the rest of the organization. Workflow is a key part, particularly for growing companies. So this is what we see holistically in all the components. Now we'll drill down a little bit more on those. So a couple of examples for each category. Liquidity and funding, looking at current cash, of course, and also the rate of return for cash balances. That's pretty important. Ability to see all the cash, funding, credit by bank, country, legal entity. You want to be able to quickly see it at any grouping, any level. And of course, for liquidity, you want to easily see how much available credit you have and how much of that credit you've actually used. On the activity and services pieces, see all bank relationships in one place very quickly, how much business you do with each of the banks, what services they provide. That's a key part to quickly see, and technology can facilitate that. You want to be able to report on all the bank accounts, what they're used for, whether they're still needed, make sure that you're constantly keeping the bank account inventory up to date and appropriate for what the company needs. On the quality side, you want to be able to measure and quantify relationship against an SLA. I mean, using a service level approach is a good way to manage quality aspects. And you need to be able to assess by bank, country, type and service. And it's also important to see what your internal customers think about the services they're getting. Usually for many companies, Treasury facilitates banking services for the rest of the organization. And in a sense, they're internal customers, and it's important to know what they think as well. So cost, we mentioned cost as being a pretty important consideration. Banking costs are pretty high. The fee structure is quite complicated in many cases, and there is lots of data associated with fees. So it's pretty hard to manage bank fees without automation. It's pretty hard to do manually or taking in PDF files and things like that. Particularly if you want an automated process for regularly monitoring and disputing charges, ensuring compliance that when you negotiate contractual prices with the banks, that the actual charges are in compliance with those contractual prices, getting an alert for if there are discrepancies. You certainly want a system to be able to tell you what you need to look at. You certainly want to be able to see, have very good cost transparency for each bank and service. And of course, you want to regularly benchmark those services against competitors. An important part of the investment aspect I mentioned before is doing earnings analysis and comparing it against market rate to see what basically whether you want to leave more balances or you don't with any given bank. And lastly, apply a ROI on managing costs. So if you spend X resources on aggressively doing cost management, you expect to make money on that effort. So if you don't do a quantitative analysis, you may be underspending on bank fee analysis, or you might be overspending. So it's important to have an ROI on that. On the compliance side, of course, that's very important to look at signatories, making sure the accounts are regularly reviewed, that everything is up to date for compliance purposes. FBAR for many large companies is a very important compliance step and can be fairly tedious to comply with. So you want automation for that as well. And make sure that any bank account changes are fully audited. There's division of responsibility in terms of approvals, that they're tagged for the appropriate legal ownership, things like that. That's very important on the compliance side. And you do get that from technology. Lastly, on the workflow side, I mentioned that Treasury typically does have a lot of workflow requests and acts as a service center for the rest of the organization. And it's very useful on the technology side to actually track those service requests. And that does allow you to apply a SLA type of approach where you can provide a service level to the rest of the organization. You can standardize the process. You can standardize checklists. That helps with quality. It certainly helps with efficiency and absolutely promotes Treasury as a center of excellence. And you certainly want to be able to see that in a real-time basis so you can actually track that. Last, I think we're going to do a quick demo. So I'm going to turn this over to Nate to show a few examples of what we spoke about and what Ernie spoke about previously. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Alf. Okay, so as Alf mentioned, I'm going to show a demo of how technology can leverage to do some of the things we've been talking about today. So in the following demonstration, I'm going to show how we can quickly answer banking relationship questions. We'll show how using visualized data and reports can be a lot more effective than traditional style reports. And finally, at the end, we'll show some in-depth analysis and what-if scenarios using visual charting and those types of technology solutions. This cockpit I'm showing here shows overall information and components about banking relationships enterprise-wide, including credit, cash, loans, workflow, banking initiatives, bank service requests, compliance, quality issues, really everything that you might want to track about your banking relationship and track and see as processes progress. Visual representations are used to convey information quickly and easily, and whenever more detail is needed, users can quickly click through to underlying information. So I'll show you a few examples of that. At the top, I have some alert metrics like accounts that need to be approved. Here's accounts in overdraft. So I can click right through and see all my bank accounts currently in an overdraft status and need to be funded today. Other examples are stats for top line numbers like our total cash on hand, credit, bank loans. Here's more information about our credit and credit facilities. If more detail is needed, you can look at the underlying credit facility agreements, terms, and fees. Here I have my bank balances by bank. I can see how much cash does the company truly have by currency. Down here, this is more getting into some of the more nuanced banking relationship items like initiatives, trying to set up new connections or new technology or new interfaces, bank service requests, so things that we're working on with the bank that we have assigned an SLA. Bank quality items, so things that are not going well with the bank, certain bank relationship that we're looking to improve. I can click through to these as well and show the detail and track by bank, the quality issue at hand, and look at all the details. Here's numbers tracking information about my bank accounts. It's important to know my inventory of bank accounts completely and how many are at each bank and what they're being used for. I can obviously do all the same types of click-throughs there by purpose. And I also wanted to show service requests. So, first I'll start with banking services. Here's the listing of all my banking services with my banks, and if I click into it, I can quickly see by capability all my high capability ACH options at bank, BB&T, Bank of America. So this is tracking banking services available, and also ability to mark their cost effectiveness and rate them on their capabilities. And very importantly, fees. We'll cover fees a little bit more in detail later on. Let me move on now to another type of visual approach, more to with mapping in our BI tool. So first, showing bank balances by country is a great way to instantly see all your cash by bank, by currency. This type of view is highly dynamic. You can zoom in, filter for a certain legal entity or other account characteristic. You can have tooltips and you can drill into the details to see balances. This tab here is more on top line management metrics, things that are tracked at a very low level detail, but enable you to see these things on a management level dashboard, such as our overall revenue, cash management, the fees that we have incurred versus our revenue, the entities and retail spaces we support, banking fees by legal entity, the number of entities supported by the Treasury group, number of legal entities. And down here, this is more about service requests coming into the Treasury group, such as bank fee, monthly statement reconciliation, change of bank account information, signature letter changes. And this is assigning SLAs to requests that come into Treasury, how Treasury is doing, keeping the SLA, and the month-over-month requests that are being received and worked on. Showing a few other types. Bank branches, here's a nice way of seeing a lot of locational information on a map. In this case, all the FDIC registered banks and their address and information. Signers, here's a nice way to see all my signers by bank, approved, unapproved, and my review process for keeping the signers assignments reviewed a certain date by a certain time. Store management, so for treasuries that manage retail locations, it's important to be able to track things like carrier analysis or fees associated with that. So the technology can help with that. Here's carrier information for a carrier such as Brinks. I can see the route, and I can also drill into information to see things like delivery days, fees, associated vault information. Treasuries can also leverage Atom service request management functionality to visualize store requests. So if stores have requests from Treasury that need to be fulfilled, you can visualize those on a map if the geography aspects are important. In our final demonstration for today, we're going to show a little bit on bank fees. So most importantly, you need to be able to track your fees over time and by bank. So here's some bank fee information by bank, by region, and then a historical view. It's very important, as we got a little bit into the details today, to track your earnings credit allowance. Your earnings allowance to calculate it and make sure that your funds are being utilized efficiently. You want to make sure that your dollars are, in the best place, and this helps you do that. So seeing your fees versus what your earnings allowance would cover, seeing your earnings allowance calculated by the system versus what was provided by the bank in case there is a difference, tracking any refunds or disputes from bank fee analysis. And lastly, once you're really aggregating data at a detail level for all your historical statements, it makes doing complex historical reporting much simpler. So in this case, if I want to look at two banks' depository services over time and basically say, what if I had used JP Morgan instead of ABN, I can see ABN is more expensive month over month since 2016. So it makes it very clear where your costs lie and when you have cost differences, and definitely tells a story to drill into by being able to visualize this information very quickly. Okay, that concludes our demonstration. So Ernie, thank you very much. I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your demonstration to me. I only wish I would have had all of this when I was a treasury manager back in the day, and I really like a lot of things. Of course, there's a lot of great functionality, but I used to run the retail treasury forum at AFP, and just the ability, right, to track of those service requests, right, and track those armored cars and things. That's absolutely fascinating to me. But just the visual approach to it, to me, is incredibly intuitive. And so that's really the way that I think. And there's also, I'll point out, a lot more functionality. Of course, Nathan didn't have enough time to go into all that, and I appreciate him being willing to let me have such a short demo. But again, this is a visual product. Those of you who watch my webinars know I'm very cautious about any kind of demos, but I think it really shows the power of what they're doing, but also the unique approach that they have, but also the product has definitely evolved over the years that I've seen. And so very responsive, especially the bank relationship management piece is very impressive. And so I know it'll only get better. So thank you so much, Nathan and Al, for sharing. So let's kind of flip gears a little bit to the role of RAROC, right? And so let's put the spotlight back on our banks, but also, on us. And so just for treasury professionals, if you know this, I apologize, but for me, I really didn't know it. I'm kind of ashamed, but I didn't. And this is something that AFP, CTP, we need to get this into the content. It might be in there. I helped write the book before this one, not this one. And so RAROC is one performance measure, right, used by banks to value your relationship. And so this gets a little dense. And usually we have a gentleman, Stefan, who's really good at making this entertaining. I'm pretty entertaining, but it's hard to make this entertaining. So I'll keep this at a high level, and we can have a hour-long call if you want going through this, but it's pretty intuitive, right? RAROC, your revenues, right? Credit, right? Revenues for the bank, right? The credit margin. Are you drawing on the credit? What are you getting? Side business, revenues and economic capital, your operating costs, liquidity costs, right? Expected loss and economic gain. And so there's a lot of detail here on this equation, and it really helps give you a color, right, about what some of these things mean for the banks, if you really want to get into it and have a conversation. But I think it's important that you understand the top line, you understand the language. You will want to run through this with your banks if you're not doing this already. Banks, if you're not ready to do this, guess what? After this webinar, I'm going to get on my platform and you're going to be doing it more often. So let's be ready. And then also, again, this is important. Know yourself, know your bank's wallet share. Just like I said, we have so much Treasury services related in fees to allocate across our banks, right? And so we need to understand the value of the business that we're awarding to our banks, and on the other side of it, right? On the bank side, so they understand, our risk profile. And for me, these are all things that were in my wallet. And so hopefully, if you're in Treasury, you are in charge of all these things. And if you're the operations manager, make sure you have your arms around all of the Treasury. You can't manage a bank relationship if you don't understand the whole picture. And this causes a misalignment in expectations with your bank. So when I was in Treasury in the early 2000s, everybody wanted to do investment banking. So they were coming in telling me we wanted to buy all these companies. And I'm like, sorry, sir, but I'm the Treasury operations manager. And this is what I want to talk about. I don't need your money. I need your Treasury services. And so again, this just helps you understand the dynamics of the relationship for both sides and the dimensions of both sides, and dimensions that your bank might be interested in, right? And you might be interested in, and you should have a conversation, right, with your banks. Oh, what's our capital structure? Do I really need your help on M&A advisory? Do we have FX exposures? Do we want your help there? All these other things, commodity risk. And so these are all the things that the bank would like to sell you, right? And so banks, you need to know your customers and know, well, Ernie really doesn't care about leasing an asset-based credit, right? So why are you coming in and telling me about it? Quite honestly, you're wasting my time, right? If you see this as a strategic place my company's gonna go, that's fine. But again, this is a really great, great side, and this is where, we're attracted. So the banks are in here, right? And these are all the things, that we want to look at the profitability, right? They have capital constraints, right? And so these are things that attract us on both sides of that relationship. Again, a lot of information on the RAROC slides. Happy to send you the presentation. I just haven't seen this information being put out in Treasury, and so I want to make sure you have the opportunity for that. And then there's different ways to create value for their shareholders on the bank. So this is really on your bank side. And so if you want to invest in being a good customer, again, you can dig on this. Maybe better have this conversation with your banks rather than having me read off these slides. But just the bullet points, right? As far as your bank is, what's their mindset, right? You need to find your risk budget, right? Your company has this risk profile, right? How are we going to allocate my risk budget? What's our decision making, right? And then what's your performance as a customer, right? So as a relationship manager, this is your value, right? I'm your relationship manager. This is the value that you as my customer are giving to my company. So what is that expectation? Let's align on that expectation, right, with your Treasury partner. Again, what comes around goes around. And then the bank says we're not meeting your rate of return, so we need more business. Ask them what it is. Okay, tell me what can I do? And so let's all be on the same page. Again, an awful lot of text, but an awful lot of valuable information. When you have time, just print the slides out, right? And so these are just some tips here. Don't be afraid to give collaterals. Be careful. Completed lines. Just so things. Here's a great thing from our perspective, from being a good customer. If you don't ask, you don't get, right? And from the bank, when it makes sense, the business, right? You don't want to overstep your bounds, but somehow you have to communicate that this could be valuable to you. And so when you become that trusted partner, when I had a trusted relationship with a banker, right, I have a big ego, but he knew how to communicate with me. Listen, Ernie, I know this isn't something that you typically look at, but if you can give me 5 minutes, and I know he's not going to sell me, right? He's honest with me, then I'm going to be open to that. So my whole point about RAROC, I was not eloquent, which is unusual for me. about the whole RAROC discussion, right? But the information is there, and you can look through the slides. You can have a conversation with your banks. I'll connect you with another practitioner in your space that can do a much better job of that. So let's go ahead and transition to some of our key takeaways here that we have. So as I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question. And one point I want to make is that bank relationships are incredibly important. And I think those of you who didn't have this as a top priority, I'm hoping that you see the value in it, right? Have a phone call, right? See what's out there, see where you are, where you want to get to, and see how much it costs to get there. Oftentimes, just if you don't really understand your bank fees, it's really valuable to do that. When I was back in Treasury, I used to look at them day by day, and this was a while ago. Some companies I knew had one person, all they did was review bank statements, and they made $100,000 a year, and they made their money back. You could say, well, they should have changed banks. Well, they didn't really, they felt like they were stuck. So the good news about technology and relationships and the visibility and transparency that solutions like Adam give you is that you don't have to feel trapped. You have a choice. You can make informed decisions, and it's really a cool time to be a Treasury leader. And so my key takeaways, there are two sides to a bank relationship, right? Let's be a good customer. Banks, let's be honest and authentic. Let's talk RAROC model, people. We want honest communication, proactive communication, be a good customer, align on your expectations as necessary. Let's be proactive there. And measure, monitor, and communicate your bank relationship success metrics with each other. And so as a customer, this is how I am valuing our relationship. Are you meeting it or not? The bank, this is what I need from you to offer more value. So let's just all communicate. Again, in order to collaborate, you have to communicate effectively. Before we sign off, I want to go ahead and thank our webinar partner today, Financial Sciences, and their commitment to thought leadership. They are a longtime partner of mine, and I sincerely appreciate their commitment to the Treasury profession and also their approach to innovation as well. I want to thank each and every one of you for attending the webinar. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you in supporting what I do, which I'm expanding to helping you own your careers anytime. I always tell people lately, knock on my door and I will answer it. Make the rest of your day great, everyone. Until next time.